We are back on It's Always Game Day in Cincinnati. Lindsay Patterson, Mike Santagata here. Mike, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good. I don't know how I'll be feeling tomorrow. I'm taking my mom to the airport, and she decided for like a 6 a.m. flight. So
Ooh.
I am leaving my house at like 3 a.m. tomorrow or 4. So that's great.
Are you, well, is your mom one of those people that needs to get, yeah, you are a good son for doing that, producer Spencer. Is your mom one of those people that needs to get to the airport super early, or is she like
That's
enough?
right. Nope,
Ooh.
early.
See, I'm
The early
exactly
flight.
like that. I like to get there. It could be 2.5, 3 hours early. You make sure your bag is there. You make sure the gate is there. You go have an overpriced coffee, and I can just hang out in the airport and people watch until my flight takes off. So, yeah, good for you. 6 a.m. flight, getting to the airport pretty early. Well,
It's gonna be something.
yeah, no, Mike. Well, you know what's gonna be something? Free agency.
Yeah,
All those big announcements are gonna be Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and I feel like all the roster cutting is happening around the league, including two former tight ends. We're kind of a day late as we're recording this, so by the time you guys hear this, I'm sure you're just a little fatigued in the tight end market. But the Cincinnati Bengals are just getting started because at the moment they have pretty much zero tight ends on their roster. I still, I'm a fan of bringing in Tanner Hudson, Drew Sample. I think a free agent, don't spend a whole lot of money on one in free agency and then draft one. They don't value the tight end position as much as other teams do. But when Joe Burrow has a tight end, he gets them paid, including Hayden Hurst and CJ Uzama. It was pretty crazy because the cuts happened just a few hours after each other. When CJ Uzama was cut from the Jets, you heard, oh, should the Bengals bring him back? Can he be tight end 2, 3? Maybe he's a practice squad tight end. Hayden Hurst, who, I felt like had a productive season when he was with the Bengals, a little
hmm
less than 500 yards. Joe Burrow got him paid, and he decided to go to the Carolina Panthers. I feel like out of the two tight ends, the Bengals aren't huge on reunions, and then guys that are in their 30s or over 30, and I know it's really close because I think Hayden Hurst just turned 30 or he's in the 30 range, and CJ Uzama is a year older than him. But when you look at these tight ends who are available, who have experience in Cincinnati, which one are you bringing back, if any?
Hiddenhurst is 30. He will turn 31 in August. So, yeah, he's well
Ooh,
past
he's
30,
getting
I
up there.
guess.
Getting up
Yeah,
there for the Bengals.
definitely would choose Hayden Hurst out of those two. And I'd also choose Tanner Hudson's also like 29.
He is.
Yeah, he's 1 year younger, like not exactly, but close to about 1 year younger than Hayden Hurst. So if Hayden Hurst is too old, I don't really understand why Tanner Hudson's not too old. It's just
He
this is
feels
his
younger.
first productive year. Yeah, I think Hayden Hurst is a better player too. But I personally, I am not a medical doctor.
Yes.
Most of us aren't. I know he had that serious head injury. If they clear him to play, he wants to play. They say that, you're not a head injury away from like a serious. I mean, I guess everybody is, but like you're not an elevated, like at a huge elevated risk. Then yeah, sure, I'm into that reunion. Like I feel like he fits stopgap, cheap. If
Mhm.
they want to draft a guy, they can. If they don't want to draft a guy, they've got a tight end for this year. I think Drew Sample comes back either way because he brings something that both guys lack in his blocking. But out of all the possible reunions, I think Hayden Hurst is pretty interesting. I think it's just like Michael Johnson too. That's what I
Mhm.
what I called it. Yeah, because he left, got paid, got cut, came back, pretty productive.
Yeah, no, I think with Hayden Hurst, and you can say the same thing about CJ Uzama. Goodness, I will have to go back in Hayden Hurst's career, but it really feels like they had one of their most productive years with Joe Burrow as their quarterback. So that would I think it would be huge if you were re-signing Hayden Hurst and say you brought a guy like Drew Sample and Tanner Hudson, and the possibility of drafting a tight end. I'm not saying Brock Bowers at 18, but there's still other tight ends in this draft that you can get in round 2, round 3. Where would you put Hayden Hurst on the depth chart? Would he be a 2 or kind of a 3-ish for you?
I mean, my first thought with Hayden Hurst is he can be your number one guy. I don't know if I would want that, but I think he like that's where I am on the stopgap. Though, like I don't think he's a worse number one guy than Tanner Hudson was last year, which is why I mentioned like I think he's better than Tanner Hudson. So I think that would be all right. But ideally probably your second guy. I think when you get into that, it gets a little funky where you're thinking like, is Hayden Hurst really your second guy? Like maybe Drew Sample plays more, maybe he doesn't. Maybe to me, they'll just probably play different roles. You'll have Hurst there as a guy that can catch the ball a bit, block a little bit, and just be an all around. Like if you want to go 12 personnel and have a true receiving threat on the field, you can go with him over Sample, and then whoever, like let's say draft pick is your number one guy. Let's just say Bowers. Let's say you have Bowers. So if you have Bowers, then you're having some fun. And now Hayden Hurst is probably your 2-3 type. I do think there's a scenario he is your number one though. If you sign him, like I think that is realistic because they're probably not signing two guys. Like you're not going to go out there and sign Hayden Hurst and then also go sign Noah Fant or whoever you're thinking of. Like they're going to bring in one guy, I think, and then they'll bring back Drew Sample. So that's what I think about it. Is just, I'm not against the Hayden Hurst reunion. He's your number one unless you draft a guy that's a higher end guy.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think if you were to choose between the two, Hayden Hurst would be the one, but I would still want the Cincinnati Bengals to draft one. And I said, they don't utilize the tight end position like other teams do. I want the Bengals to do that. I know you have a guy like Jamar Chase, you have T. Higgins. I think it's going to be a fun year for Yoshi in year two. There was a report, obviously, Matthew Berry on NBC Sports. He was at the Combine. You're going to hear a lot of agents and front office members talking, and it sounded like one of the quotes he got was Joe Burrow really trusts Yoshi, that connection, and it was very short-lived in his rookie year. So I'm excited what that looks like. So there are other playmakers, but I still hope the Cincinnati Bengals utilize the tight end position going into 2024, and Joe Burrow do what he does best, get tight ends paid again. Maybe Hayden Hurst will get paid again after being with the Cincinnati Bengals for like a year. We'll see what that looks like. But yeah, if I were to choose between the two, Hurst is the one, and they're free to sign with any team at any moment. But I would be surprised if the Bengals signed him or made any big signings until free agency starts. When you look around the league and see other guys who might get released over the next few days, and when free agency unofficially starts on Monday. So we'll have more of that next week. Next, I want to talk a little offensive line. You have a great piece over on All Bengals when it comes to the Cincinnati Bengals. We've talked enough about tackles. I want to talk about guard play on It's Always Game Day in Cincinnati. We are back on It's Always Game Day in Cincinnati, offensive line, and the Cincinnati Bengals trenches to be determined on what it looks like for them. They need depth. They need depth all over that offensive line. They do not currently have a swing tackle on their offensive line. They need a right tackle on their offensive line. And I am officially on the board of you can't be afraid to upgrade your guard position. I'm not saying every single one of them, but there's at least one that you need to get more out of if it is a camp competition between left guard. And you could say the thing about Alex Kappa, but I feel like they're going to stick with Alex Kappa. Ted Karras, it's probably going to be his last year in Cincinnati, but we'll see what that looks like. And you can get more out of your center position. But interior for the Bengals offensive line needs to be better in 2024. When you think about the Cincinnati Bengals and free agency, outside of the room, and even in this draft, what is your outlook right now for that September offensive line in the interior?
Man. So if I had to guess, I feel like if I had to guess, I don't think they're going to upgrade the interior, and I feel like they should, but I don't think they will, and that is what it is. I don't. I think they should at least they should be open to it is what I feel, because there's plenty of free agents they could look at. There are draft guys, which we'll get into one of them, that we could look at as upgrades. And I don't know what it is about, I think Volson is perfectly fine. I think he's also a guy you could upgrade on. That would be the point. People seem to be very into the idea of upgrading Dax, upgrading Turner. I think those guys have higher potential to be better than what Volson is right now, but they're probably about the same level, replacement guy. That's how they played last year. And you could upgrade from what they were last year. The difference is Volson is almost Jonah's age, and those two are 22, 23. They're pretty young, 24 maybe. So I feel like there's plenty of opportunity for growth with those two, but we're not talking about them right now. We're just talking about kind of the offensive line. I think they're going to look for a right tackle, some type of stopgap. There's been a lot of smoke with the Mekhi Becton idea. There's probably some more guys out there that they could look at. I think they're going to look at a guy that they could sign and also replace in the draft without feeling too bad about it. So we'll see. I think that they could find a guy, a center or a guard, because Karras could flip to either guard spot that could be an improvement for them. And with the way Joe Burrow plays, like he's willing to play through muddy pockets, step up into the pressure, but they never have an offensive line that feels firm in that interior. And it feels like that could help them, especially Orlando Brown, whereas he weakest is allowing pressure around the back. Well, the pressure around the back means a lot less when the quarterback can step up and is willing to step up, which Joe Burrow is. So I would look at adding an interior guy, maybe starting over Volson, maybe at center, maybe you kick Karras over, or maybe it's just depth too. I mean, maybe the guy doesn't win the job and just pushes Volson to be better. Whatever you do to improve that is going to improve the depth, I think, is a huge part of that, where you just roll Volson out there because you're like, well, we don't want him to lose his job. You know, he's a 4th-round pick. He's cheap. Okay, he gets hurt, and you didn't sign anybody worth competing with him for his job. You're going to move down. You're going to get a worse player that's in that spot now, whether that's Cody Ford or that's Max Sharping or, I don't know, Deontay Smith, Jackson Carman, like somebody in there that is like, okay, this is a true liability. This is a tier down from Volson versus getting at least a Volson tier player, like another replacement level starter, where it's like, yeah, he's fine. And then he pops in there because nobody makes it through the whole season with their offensive line intact. The Bengals should know that more than anyone.
No, I think all of that is really huge. And what I've kind of talked myself into, because we can do this until everything is official and these players that we have on our wish list are gone and it won't be possible. But after our last podcast, when you brought up Tyron Smith, I'm officially, let's go, right tackle. And I see the vision when it comes to pick 18, because in my head, I'm going to be realistic. I think Brock Bowers is gone. I think about 4 of the tackles. I mean, it's fun. It's fun to guess now. But I do think he'll be gone. You know, even Brian Thomas Jr., who I think a lot of people have mocked at the Cincinnati Bengals as a wide receiver, he looks gone in some mock drafts. It changes every single day. Of course, it's going to. And then pro days will happen. But for me, you know, Mims could be gone. Latham could be gone. I feel like his stock is rising, even though I did see a mock to the Bengals today. But for your pick, and at least out of some of the tackles that you see in the first round and at pick 18, you have a great piece on all Bengals. I like the vision of moving a rookie that you feel confident in into the guard position, getting a right tackle in free agency for 1 to 2 years, 1 year if you want, but most of them are going to want to sign for 2 years. Get that deal done. And then, you know, if anything happens, get Cordell Volson on the bench if you need him. I don't know. I just think there's so many different things you can possibly do with an offensive line, and you can't predict health on who's going to be there in the end. So let's talk a little bit about your all Bengals piece and your vision at 18.
One of many possible visions. I think this guy would be there, but he did have a really good combine. I'm into the idea of Troy Fautanu being the guy that they take at 18. And reason there is, I think he is kind of a higher floor guy because he's got really good technical ability. I think he can play guard or tackle. I would put him at guard. I think that's where he's best. And I get the idea of put a guy at tackle, let him prove you wrong. But to me, I'd like to get him more practice where he's going to be playing his best football. So that's at guard to me. Yeah, he's athletic. He's extremely smart. He's technically refined, and he's got some strength to him. So there's some stuff that I'll get into in a little bit that are kind of the negatives. He's not a perfect prospect. Otherwise, he'd be going in the top 5, 10. But when you look at that, it's a pretty good building block, and it's a high floor. I think there is a ceiling there. It's not like you take him and like, well, he's a mid-level starter and that's all he'll ever be. Like, I think there's a ceiling there on the inside, especially that you can hit a Pro Bowl, maybe a higher type of ceiling. He's a little older, so that plays into it. But yeah, he's interesting to me because I think he's a guy that's a little bit like Onwenu to me or Elgton Jenkins, where guys that they're passable on the outside, but they're good inside. And he might be the next in that line to be a guy that's like, you put him at tackle, like, yeah, he's fine.
Yeah.
But you put him inside, it's like, oh, that guy's really good. And I feel like that could be really useful for the Bengals, especially if they find a right tackle that is a little bit better than your George Fants, your Mekhi Bectons of like, you bring in Trent Brown, Mike Onwenu, maybe he's kind of got the thing where it's like, I'd rather have him see him at guard. So maybe you bring in like a Trent Brown, or you bring in a Luminor, or whatever. You've got your guy there that is near Jonah's level, and that's an okay right tackle. And then you put this guy in at guard. Sounds awesome to me. So like that idea, like him a lot as a prospect. Nasty. He got his helmet pulled off in the middle of a play, kept going, blocked somebody else. Thought that was pretty cool.
Glass eater.
So yeah, glass eater. Well, people have
no, they don't like that.
Frank. They have turned on Frank. They say it sarcastically now, which I thought it was like whatever when he first said it, but they ran with it so much. If you're worried a lot about Frank's ability to develop a guy, then this would be the guy you take to me. Like, I wouldn't, if you're really worried about how the offensive line coach can develop somebody, I wouldn't bother with like a Marius Mims, and I wouldn't bother. I even feel like Fuaga and Jackson Powers Johnson have more work needed to reach a higher seal, to reach, Fautanu's floor than Fautanu would need to keep getting better. So I hear all the time, it's like, but Frank can't develop that guy. You draft a guy that can already play, stick him in there, plug and play type situation. It doesn't really matter. It's like if Creed Humphrey got drafted to a worse offensive line coach, is he bad? No, probably not. I think he's still probably a good player. So that's where I am on it. I feel like you find these high floor offensive linemen that still have a ceiling to them. That's pretty rare. That's something that I would look for, because the ability to just come in, plug and play in the first round as an offensive lineman, I don't care if it's a guard or tackle. You look at what Tyler Smith's done for the Cowboys, I don't think they're like, we wish he was a tackle. It's like, no, he's an awesome guard. Let's just roll with that. And Chris Lindstrom in Atlanta, like, the Bengals took Jonah over him. Jonah is a fine right tackle. Chris Lindstrom's a great right guard. The Bengals would probably rather have the great right guard than the decent right tackle. Like, let's not pigeonhole ourselves into this conversation of tackle. Like, if the best guy, offensive lineman available is a guard, and he's the best player available, go ahead and take him. So that's where I am on it. I understand a lot of the ideas. I think he would start year one over Volson, and then you just have your right tackle out there. Let's say your right tackle let's say you do the real fun thing that I've dreamed about that will never happen, and you go ahead and you go get Tyron Smith. And let's say Tyron Smith is starting for you. Well, Tyron Smith misses 3-4 games a year. You know what you could do in that scenario is, instead of having a highly paid swing tackle to move back and forth behind Tyron, is you have Fautanu, I'm not 100% sure what it is.
I butcher his name.
Yeah. Have him flip to right tackle, and you bring in Volson, who's a replacement level starter, and put him right in at left guard. And your offensive line it's going to miss a beat from losing a Tyron Smith level player, but that's still a pretty decent offensive line. If you can get a guy that can just step in and play either side, either tackle spot or guard spot, I think that's an awesome chess piece to have. Kind of like I'm not a huge baseball guy, but kind of like the baseball player that can play like all the infield positions, where maybe he's like a really good player, really good bat, and he could play first, second, third, and short. It's like, no, our second baseman started. It's like, let's just flip him over, and we got a backup that we like at third base or whatever it is. So I feel like those guys are out there. That's kind of what I view Fautanu.
He's a Bengal. We'll get it. We'll have it. Yeah. We'll be ready.
We got Yosivash.
Yosivash is easy now. Yeah. It's just like, whatever. I remember that first night when they drafted him, I was like, oh no, this is going to take a moment. But it would be fun. I'm definitely on board. I think the closer we get, and I've said it over the last week or so, I do think the Cincinnati Bengals, it would be smart to take a tackle. Again, I will change my mind if Brock Bowers is sitting there at 17, and I'll say, gotta get him. You have to get him. But a lot is going to really factor into free agency. But I still think that the Bengals fans should have an open mind when it comes to some of these players that could be there at 18 if they do take an offensive tackle and he's better to guard position. And they have a plan. I don't think the Cincinnati Bengals would go into the draft without a tackle in free agency and just say, you know what? 18, we're going wide receiver, we're going tight end without getting that player. And I'm talking about like a mid to average offensive line right tackle to what I feel like they're going to lean towards in free agency. But we'll see what it looks like in less than a week when it comes to the Bengals offensive line. But Bengals fans should really check that piece out. I know Mike will have plenty of content coming during free agency, the NFL draft, pro days that'll be coming up over on All Bengals, and you can follow them Bengals_Sands. Next, we'll do a little free agency wish list, internal, external, for the Cincinnati Bengals on It's Always Game Day in Cincinnati. We are back on It's Always Game Day in Cincinnati. Free agency is days away, and I cannot wait for this to happen. Moves all over the NFL. Maybe the Cincinnati Bengals will be big spenders. They don't have to do all the Buffalo Bills cuts or restructures. I mean, it's crazy out there if you're the Buffalo Bills right now. I think they were $40 million over the cap, and they're trying to make it all work, and a lot of releases for them. For the Cincinnati Bengals, I won't even make you do all external wish list. You can do some of the internal. But if you look at some of the position groups, and it is Monday morning, who do you want to hear Ian Rappaport, Adam Schefter say the Cincinnati Bengals agree to terms with? Internal, external candidates in free agency.
The first was the guy I mentioned, Tyron Smith. Like, yeah, I would be ecstatic if they like 1-2 year deal with Tyron Smith. Like, this is about it. I think I'm going to look it up. I'm going to make sure before I say something stupid. So I'm going to look up his age. He's 33. 30. When does he turn 34? He turns 34 in December. So later this year. I'm just going to check. Yeah, this could be your Trent Williams signing because Trent Williams is 35 and he's been pretty good. He missed games when he was in Washington before they made that.
Did this year.
He missed games this year. So like this, in theory, like the ceiling of this could be your Trent Williams trade, like, or your Trent Williams signing. Like, it seems like these guys are hitting the older injured offensive tackle is hitting the market more often. Teron Armstead did that. Been a Pro Bowler both years for Miami, by the way. Hasn't missed a playoff game. Tyron Smith, despite missing these games every year, 0 missed playoff games. And Trent Williams, I don't believe he's missed a playoff game. And another guy that's like, yeah, he misses games. Who cares? Like, if he plays when it matters. So I am on it. I think he would be one of the best signings you could have. I don't know how realistic it is. I think it would have to come. Somebody's got to move to right tackle. Now, I don't know if that's Tyron Smith because he played there 10 years ago, or if that's Orlando Brown when he played there 5 years ago. You just have to sell one of them on the idea of let's make this offensive line as great as it could possibly be and go win a Super Bowl. Maybe you have to sell it to both of them. I don't know, but sell it to one of them. Maybe you could sell that to Orlando and get them to restructure and flip. And I'm not talking about restructures and pay cut. I'm talking about like just push some money around.
Yeah.
Create a light cap hit this year, maybe next year. Bring in Tyron Smith for 1-2 years. Let him play wherever. In this scenario, he'd be playing left tackle, but maybe you talk to Tyron Smith. The thing I have worried with Tyron Smith is there's probably going to be a team like the Chiefs that'll go, hey, we'll give you the same money and you can stay at left tackle for us because that's what they need. So you got to figure out a way to really entice him to come to Cincinnati versus everywhere else because I think he's going to have a lot of suitors. Really good player, going to be 34 this year, younger than Trent Williams. I'm sure everybody would love to have Trent Williams. So that is the first guy that – noon. I want to hear Ian Rappaport say agreed to terms with the Bengals. It'd be expensive. The projected per year average is only $10 million.
Done.
Exactly. I mean, I would go much higher, especially on like a 1-year deal. Like I would do like a 116 or 17 or something, just like move some Orlando money around. Maybe that's why you cut Mixon, move it up to 18, 1 year, $18 million or something like that, something crazy. So you're like, look, we're going for the Super Bowl. Like T. Higgins, he's on a franchise tag. Tyron Smith, 1-year deal. Like let's take this talented team with a few holes and let's push all the chips in. And you're not going to bottom out and completely fall apart. You always will have Burrow. You'll have Chase. You'll have like a good core nucleus of this team. But we're going to lose some pieces. So let's just go all in. Last year sucked. Let's just push
a lot. Well,
So that's the first name I have. Do you have a name that is probably a little unrealistic, but on your wish list?
unrealistic on all my wish lists. It was obviously Chris Jones a while ago, but I do think the Kansas City Chiefs will figure something out with him.
I hope
Um,
they somehow lose both players. Like Snead does get traded, and then they're too late to get to Chris Jones. He's like, I accepted a deal with the Raiders.
but that Chris Jones thing, that's gonna have to get figured out. I
Yeah,
mean, it's free agency. You got to get a deal done, or there's going to be teams that have already. I mean, somebody will open their doors for Chris Jones, but when it comes to big money, the Kansas City Chiefs will have to figure it out. So I want to see how that works out. But for me, I wouldn't even say it isn't a realistic chance it's happening. When we talk about the safety position, I know how a lot of people feel. I'm still a team Dax Hill. I love Jordan
I
Battle.
am too, and especially like when you think about like that. Maybe you're going somewhere with this. I wasn't expecting, but where I think you're going, when you think about how you're putting together like your offseason plan, when you start throwing an extra 8 million at the safety position, that's 8 million that could go to a defensive tackle or to Tyron Smith or wherever. So what you could finish that now.
I don't know if this will be a good financial decision,
Oh,
but so I don't want this to be an anti Dax or Jordan because I love both of them, and I'm
oh,
excited.
you were going with the pay the safety. I thought you were
I'm
going
going
against it.
safety. I'm going safety, but nothing. I want to do Geno Stone.
Geno Stone.
24 years old, will be 25 next month. He's the type of guy I feel like they make in some of these free agency moves from the Baltimore Ravens. Young guy, he's a safety. He's familiar with the AFC North. He has one of Joe Burrow's interceptions. And I don't know, there's something about him that I think that youth would still be good. And I know a lot of people look kind of like some of these safety veterans, and Nick Scott will probably get cut to be determined if they bring another body. And I'm not saying I wanted to impact Dax Hill or Jordan Battle too much, but I kind of like Geno Stone, and I feel like they will bring in a safety in free agency. I
That's all
truly
the smoke is. Where I am on is I would personally probably just let those guys play so I have more money to play around with in the trenches because that's what I'm more worried about for next season. But I get it too. I mean, do you can only put so many eggs into the baskets of these defensive back groups when they were up and down last year. They looked a little raw last year. Do you just bet on them getting better? Probably not. So maybe that is a Geno Stone signing. I have no idea what he's going to go for. Projected 6.5. I believe this is all PFF projections per year. That's fine.
they feel like a
That's
3-year deal, 3-year deal in Cincinnati.
yeah. So we would have to see. My only worry is like we talked about with the Dax Hill thing is like, well, realistically, he's a 1 year type guy. Like he
His
was,
tackling isn't that great either, so that'll be kind of a
but I don't care that much. I mean, I care, but I don't care that much, especially if I think Jordan Battle's really sure tackler. So maybe that covers it up a little bit. I worry a little bit about like what do you do with Dax Hill in that scenario, but
yeah.
maybe you don't worry about it. Maybe you just whatever. Like we're just going to build the best possible team. Like that is a scenario that you can do that with. So I think the other unrealistic one I wanted to hit real quick was in the internal DJ Reader. Just bring him back signing. As long as like you think his medicals, he'll be okay next year. It doesn't even have to be at the start of next year, but like his rehab's going all right. It's not an injury that you think is going to ruin his career. Just bring him back. He's so important. And Lou and Rumo talked about that, but it's real hard to replace guys like DJ Reader.
Leadership.
And leadership, what he does on the field, off the field, like all of that. And I always have in my brain, there's two ways you go about it. You find these average guys in free agency and you just plug the holes and move on. But you have to pay a lot of money for those guys. And we've learned that with the free agent offensive linemen. And that's why I don't really love going that route unless it's for a guy like Tyron Smith or maybe Mike Onwenu, like difference makers. Like, sure, just throw whatever at right tackle so you have a body there that's not Jackson Carman. But when it comes to some of these positions, I'm like, do you just want to like roll with what's there and then save some money so you can make these big signings? Because I feel like DJ Reader is a signing that really matters. Like, that's a guy that he's a big difference maker. We've seen it. And I trust that he'll be okay as long as the medical staff's going to say that. He came back from this injury before, I believe, his first year here and had an awesome season 2 years in a row. And then third year, he was having another good season before the injury. He's very important. And I would very much like to see him back in stripes, but I think it's unrealistic because he's going to be 30 or maybe is 30, one of the two. Like next year, he'll be 30, or at least he is 30, one of these two. But, like that's what the Bengals don't like to pay. And That's the issue. So they don't like to pay that. They probably don't care about paying a nose tackle, top of the line money. You look at those things, whatever. He's younger than Grover Stewart. And I know that's the signing people like the idea of. Younger than Sheldon Rankins, another signing. And I think he's about the same age as Leonard Williams. So there's not really a lot of young defensive tackles that are hitting this market and able to pay one of these guys and let them be the next DJ Reader. Just bring back DJ Reader. I don't think those tackles really take their dip until about age 32. So you have a few years. Give him a 3-year deal, 2 of it's real, 1 of it's kind of fake, or 4-year deal, 2 real, 1, 2 fake type of thing. Like if he's still really good, you can keep him. If he's not, you can get off that contract. Just another move, just keep him, push the chips in, because I feel like this defense has enough holes that I don't want to, especially at defensive tackle already, I don't want to go creating a massive one, the second, first, third, whatever, top 3 player on your defense.
I say bring DJ Reader back and then sign another free agent, maybe tier 2 defensive tackle.
Yeah, you need another defensive tackle either way. You're going to talk about needing 2 to 3 defensive tackles if Reader's gone, because the only guy you've got that's worth playing is BJ Hill.
No offense to BJ Hill. I appreciate your work, but no, you need to double dip in free agency. One of them can be a higher tier. I feel like they'll be kind of in the 3 tier-ish area for one of their defensive tackles. But I would love DJ Reader. If you read that article by Joe Burrow, Ben Baby on ESPN, he brought that up from some of these younger guys they're drafting. You lose a guy like DJ Reader, that is a huge leadership person, not in the locker room. And for what it's worth, DJ Reader was on a flight with my coworker on the way to Atlanta last week. And she said, I really want you to come back to the Cincinnati Bengals. And he said, I would like to come back too. And I'm sure he was just being nice. Maybe he wasn't. Maybe he really wants to come back to Cincinnati. But I really, 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 really want him here. And I think that is definitely one of my internal. There's another one I want to add, obviously kind of a lower key when you think about the linebacker position. Marcus Bailey, Akeem Davis-Gaither. I hope one of them is back in the linebacker room.
I think it'll be Bailey because I think he'd be cheaper.
He'd definitely be the cheaper one, but
yeah, I think they just go with the cheaper one, right? Like because I personally I don't like Akeem Davis-Gaither was always ahead of him on the depth chart, but I think whenever they played games, I never went. And Akeem Davis-Gaither is a little bit more useful on game day as your third linebacker, I think. But when they've both started, I didn't go like, oh man, that guy's clearly better. Shockingly, when they both played, I've both gotten like, ooh, this is pretty good actually. This is decent. This is all right. This is pretty good linebacker depth. So you'll no longer be like 4 deep at linebacker that can all play realistically, but you're 3 deep if you bring one of those guys back.
I definitely think they need to. You're right. Marcus Bailey's probably going to be the better one. One other thing I want to hit on really quickly. When you think about the running back position, again, I know there are reports. They said it last year to be determined if they cut Joe Mixon. We'll find out in the next week or two because his roster bonus is due in a little over a week. And then free agency. And there are a lot of running backs available right now. Jay Morrison he put this out yesterday. And I feel certain ways about it, like 50-50. He had J.K. Dobbins and Clyde Edwards-Helaire coming to Cincinnati. What scares me about JK is his injury history. I want to say Achilles and ACL. So
yeah, I think so. And what scares me about Clyde is he's slow without those injuries.
Yeah. So I don't know if I would double dip and get rid of Mixon.
I don't know if I'd want either one of those guys, really.
I know. I'm like,
Dobbins brings explosiveness, I guess, if you trust that he gets better from his injury. But
for the price of less than what you'd pay Joe Mixon for the two of them, it's tough. Paired up with Chase Brown.
If you're sure doing something fun at running back, I mean, I think there's worse ways you can go than Dobbins. I don't know if I would go that route. I would not go the Clyde route. I almost expect it to happen because I'm not a fan. Or like they're always going to do something that just makes me go like, I wouldn't have done that. No. So I think it'll happen, but I'm trying to find running backs. I feel like there are plenty of running backs to choose from.
Zach Moss is one of them.
I think this is a weird one, and you already talked about one Raven, and we just talked about another one. But to me, to fit the Joe Mixon role, if you cut him, Gus Edwards makes sense.
I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah, like he's efficient, and he's short yardage, and he can pass protect a little. Like that's where I would probably go, like just to find a useful player to go with the explosive Chase Brown, and maybe you want like more explosion, more speed, whatever. Like the Antonio Gibson idea is great until I'm thinking of like 3rd and 1. who the heck is out there, like to try to go pick up that yard, or do you have a third guy that maybe you drafted, or maybe you went and got Zach Moss or something? I don't know, but Gus Edwards to me is like a guy that's like, yeah, sure. Like you cut Joe Mixon, save $6 million and give him like a $2 million deal. Like, I don't think he's going to cost much, right? 3 mil. What? I think I have the projected if it's on. No, he wasn't on
And that
list.
money goes to Tyron.
Yeah, that's right. You save all the money to go get Tyron Smith, and anybody's running behind Tyron Smith. It's fine.
Whoa, I see the vision. I've always said the Bengals were a Riley Reef away from a Lombardi. Man, imagine if they had a right tackle like him
Yeah,
coming.
stop skipping on the high end talent that's out there. Stop skipping on the Joe Tooney to go bring in lower end talent that's cheaper. Skipping on Teron Armstead. They went and got Orlando Brown, which is great. Go do
They
it
need
again.
to restructure.
Just go get an awesome right tackle. And yeah, the Orlando Brown thing, go restructure him because it doesn't cost him any money. And to go with that, I mean, it saves you cap. Like, it just costs actual money for the ownership. They can afford it. I've seen the advertisements.
Man, we really did have this wish list over here. Is there anybody else you want to mention before we close this out?
Sheldon Rankins would be pretty awesome. I don't know if they'll go that route, but it seems fun. He's 30, so that's why I don't know if they'd go that route. The real weird ones to get into would be Cameron Johnston and Tommy Townsend.
Oh, let's go.
The punters. They're both really good punters. Like, I know Townsend he had a little bit of a down year. So then I'm like, well, maybe you just go Cameron Johnston, who was injured, but I think he's almost as good. Like, he's also a really good punter. Like, there's good punters out there. They're on my wish list. I would pay one of them money. And
Townsend and Evan McPherson went to college together, right?
Townsend and Evan McPherson? Townsend's
maybe I
my
have
age.
Maybe I have it completely flipped on another
I'm
team.
going to check what college he went to. He's from Orlando, Florida. He did go to the College of Florida. When was he there?
Oh, Evan McPherson, your special team.
He was there in 2019. I'm sure McPherson was probably there in 2019.
I see the vision. And in the Bengals, and honestly, hearing from Darren Simmons talk about Brad Robbins in his rookie year, he was definitely honest with how he felt. And I think they're definitely going to bring in competition in camp. I don't know what that looks like. I don't think it's going to be Drew Chrisman, for anybody calling for Drew Chrisman to come back. I think the door's shut there, but you do have to get better at the punter position. And it's extremely important. It's the reason they lost an AFC championship game.
Yeah. Also, just should they bring in a wide receiver, or do you just trust them to either draft a guy or roll with what they've got? I mean, I'd think about bringing in a competent slot receiver because I don't think Yoshi really is a slot receiver type. I think he's an outside guy. And then you're putting a lot of eggs in the Charlie Jones basket where he didn't really show much at slot receiver this past season. So, like, do you go look at KJ Osborne or something? Just be like, look, if we draft a guy, you're on the bench. If we don't, we've got a starter. Like, it probably doesn't cost much.
I mean, look, I've said it before, Joe Burrow can get people paid. So maybe you do. Obviously, I think Tyler Boyd is definitely gone. I think that people are saying that he could make like $8 million a year, and there's a little bit of a decline with him over the last few years. So yeah, maybe you're getting that. You're going to have to get another receiver. It's not going to be a huge name or anything like that because you're going to be paying Jamar Chase and T. Higgins to be determined if they end up working out an extension or not. So yeah, I think, but I do believe the Bengals front office believes in Yoshi and Charlie.
I think so too. I don't know if he fits what they need next year. Like, is that something you look at? Because I think KJ Osborne's played quite a bit of slot, and he's a good blocker. Like, there's reasons that you'd bring him in to just be like competent. Like, the draft board falls in a way that we don't get the second round receiver. We took offensive tackle in the first round, and we took a defensive tackle that fell to us somehow in the second round. And then you're like, well, I don't know about starting a third round receiver in that spot. And then we don't think that's where Yoshivash plays his best football. That would be nice to be able to fall back on. It could be anybody out there. I mean, Curtis Samuel's another guy that plays a lot of slot that is just fun, fast, whatever.
Would you rather than put money to Curtis Samuel or
no?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I just whatever's cheap is where I am. Like, go find a guy that's like $3 or $4 million to just be a body in that slot. Maybe it's Nick Westbrook Akine. I think that's another guy that's like a name.
I honestly think it's day 2 wide receiver for them. It's just a day 2 wide receiver, and they're rolling with the young guys.
All right.
I truly think
it's a good draft for it. Apparently, I haven't watched anyone.
It's leap year, I told you.
I've watched two guys. I watched Lad McConkey, good player.
Not gonna
Probably
be
gonna
there.
be yeah, he's not a guy you take at 18, but he's not a guy that's gonna fall to 49. And then
Kansas
Troy
City.
Franklin, I feel worse about him than I do McConkey, but I think it actually fits the exact same thing where he's gonna not worth taking at 18, and then if he falls to he's not gonna be there at 49, I don't think.
No. One of those that you mentioned will go to the Kansas City Chiefs.
Somebody. I
They'll
don't
go
know.
wide receiver. They'll go wide receiver.
Yeah.
We are on fumes. We'll go ahead and wrap this up.
All right. So they're going to sign nobody we talked about.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens. If we were right, we're right. We'll use the clip. We'll use the clip on Monday's podcast. But we'll have more. We'll be back Monday night. I'm excited because I feel like there will be a move. Maybe there won't, but there'll be one in the NFL that we can talk about in free agency. Make sure you're following Mike over on All Bengals. Follow him on Twitter, Bengals_Sands. You can follow me at Ellen Diaz Patterson. Thank you for listening to It's Always Game Day in Cincinnati.